the technology to enable us, I am happy to announce that our two guest speakers tonight are with us. She can introduce herself. She comes from the Ministry of Justice. She's going to make a presentation on restorative justice, the Gacaca experience. Madam, you are welcome.
Thank you. My name is Humiliation. I work for the Ministry of Justice, where I'm the Principal State Attorney in charge of Access to Justice Department. I said that my name is Humiliation. I work for the Ministry of Justice as Principal State Attorney in charge of Access to Justice Department. I'm happy to be with you in this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. We have our friend Damasen, known to some of you. He already introduced himself. He's going to present to us about fighting the genocide ideology. I wanted just to note their presence. So without wasting your time, I was requested this morning to put on the shoes of my boss, who was supposed to be here, Jean-Baptiste, maybe known to some of you, to make a presentation on how we have tried to reconstruct ourselves as Rwandans. Next. My presentation will not dwell much on the history, but as the Bishop rightly put it, we have had a massive violation of human rights in our country since the late 50s. Of course, even earlier than that, there were some pockets of, but it culminated in the genocide in the 1994. Then our reconciliation process is rooted into the negotiations for peace between the then government of Rwanda and the Rwanda Patriotic Front that culminated into the signing of the Arusha Agreement in August 1993. And in that agreement, they had put there an article that indicated that we need to have a Unity and Reconciliation Commission. So when we are talking of the challenges we faced since 1994, as you can see, we had over 1 million people dead. We had everything destroyed. Social fabric, infrastructure. We had 3 million refugees in refugee camps in Congo, in Tanzania, in Burundi, in Uganda. We had 300,000 orphans and non-accompanied minors. We had 500,000 widows. Thousands of handicapped and horrified and vulnerable people, a highly divided, suspicious and traumatized population. The whole economy and the infrastructure was totally in disarray and destroyed. There was rampant insecurity that resulted from perpetrators of genocide who were hiding in swamps, in hills and forests. Of course, the country's capacity to enforce law and order was also handicapped. I think by 1994-5, I remember where I was. My chief magistrate was a secondary school graduate of 2 years of secondary education. So if the chief magistrate was 2 years of secondary education, you can imagine the judges below the chief magistrate. And you can imagine the type of justice he was ready to pass. Then the judicial system, even the few who had existed, those semi-qualified or unqualified ones, either had died or were in the camps. So we are beginning from the scratch. And in a circumstance like after the genocide, with the rigors of genocide, we needed justice. And we had, as he said, 120,000 people. And when we try to look at the way forward, what should Rwanda do then? So number one, we're Edouard, subira inyuma gato turebe. So we had 120,000 people, suspects of genocide, in prisons. And using the traditional means, the classic justice system, I think Arusha has had 63 cases over a period of 10 years. 20 years, in fact.
20.
Because it was established in 1995, and today it is 20 years. But it was still struggling with 63 cases, I think, something like that. So if in 20 years it is 63 cases, can you imagine 120? Those were in prison. But outside prison, because Gachacha tried, as they will rightly tell you, around 2 million people. So if just 63 people, 20 years, 2 million, how much would it take? Around the same number of years. Next. As you can see, each conflict has causes and its dynamics. And ours was peculiar in that it has the, internal component. I usually tell people, we have a common saying around us that, it was the Belgians who brought divide and rule, the colonialists. Of course, the first people who tried to measure were Germans. And the Rwandans, because they are friendly to Germans, they don't usually talk about it. But when you see the first measure of the northern ear, it was done by Germans, not Belgians. Of course, the Belgians brought the Waro and the Frama ideology here and rooted it here, but the first measurement of nose, ears, and whatever, and eyes was done by. So we had our own characteristic of the environment we are operating in, and therefore this one required us to look into our own means to reconstruct ourselves. So we had to come up with a peace-building strategy relevant to our circumstance. Of course, the destruction magnitude also determines the ways and means of doing it. And looking at what we had, the state of our morals, social and economic, the education we had played a role in the product of leaders and the people we had on the ground, and the opportunities given to our people. Because as we will note in the grassroots consultations that the Commission carried out in 1999 when it was established, when we asked the people what they think were the reasons that led people to commit atrocities of genocide to the Tutsi, one of the reasons given was bad leadership. Number 2 was ignorance. Number 3 was extreme poverty, and many others. And ignorance. So that when we look at our solutions, we realize that to fight that ignorance, we started with the universal primary education, later on 9-year basic education, and now we have 12-year basic education. So that all Rwandans are given an opportunity to go to school, so that there is no reason that they are unable to think for themselves. Then when it comes to bad leadership, we had to design our solution of decentralization. So you will see that if you looked at around the region, because ours is a recent decentralization program and policy, we looked at the Tanzanian policy, we looked at their loopholes and avoided them, their mistakes, we avoided them. We looked at good ideas from theirs. We went to the one of Uganda, picked good ideas, the one of Kenya, good ideas, the one of Ghana, and came to Europe and others, and came up with our model of decentralization that we sought to empower our people to have a voice, to have a say in whatever they are doing. And our president said, I quote, that his vision, my vision of Rwanda is a united country, not united, that feels itself as integrated into the sub-region family of nations. In other words, we are not fighting to be a strong nation with weak neighbors. We are saying we must see ourselves growing with our neighbors. We must be in a family. Good things from Tanzania, we copy our good things, we push them to Tanzania, so that to Burundi, to Congo, so that we grow into a family of comfortable and peaceful nations. A country that is developed and has eradicated poverty we have so many, as the grassroots consultations indicated, that the cause was extreme poverty. Immediately, the first thing that was done was to establish a poverty alleviation program. And later on, that was translated into the first economic development and poverty alleviation strategy during his term as a minister. He was Emmanuel was our Minister of State, I think, during that period when we were establishing the first EDPRS as a strategy to fight and reduce poverty. And I'm happy to note that between 2008 and 2012, Rwanda managed to move away over 1 million people from below, who were below the poverty line. And our poverty levels dropped from around 60 to now around 37, almost a half, within a period of not more than 10 years. And I'm happy to note that around 2011, Rwanda was the fast growing economy, I think, in the world, 11.4. China was number 2, but because Rwanda is a small economy, it was not mentioned, but because China was 11.2. So Rwanda was not mentioned, but it was the best growing economy. But when you are growing from 0, for me as a teacher of mathematics, when you have 2 people and one who decides to say no, we say 50% of the people, but 50% of 2 is 1. But if you are talking of 50% of 1 million, you are talking of 500,000. So I think that's why they took the Chinese theory, because they are talking of a bigger economy compared to our smaller economy. So I was talking of a developed country that has eradicated poverty, a country that is democratic. When we talk of democracy, you know, I'm fortunate that apart from studying mathematics, I'm also a graduate of democracy, governance, and public policy. And I usually tell people that there is no democracy that can fit everybody. It may work here and may not work there. You may be good neighbors, very close, sharing everything, but when it comes to the modalities of the design may be the same, but when it comes to implementation strategy, if you try my strategy, you may fail, because maybe you have more professors of anthropology and few technologists, and for me I have the other way around. So at the end of the day, the results will not be the same. So in our case of democracy, we realize that in the third world, politics is a source of income. In other words, politicians are better paid, better in quotation, than the public servants and the public, because we don't have a strong private sector. So most people are employees of the government. So you realize that if winner takes it all, the model you have in most of your countries, I hear in the US, the moment somebody enters the State House, if the chief of staff or the technical staff must get out of the State House and you bring a new group of people. For our case, if push those ones on the street, then you are just creating a rebel movement or a coup d'etat for yourself. So we realize that since this is the source of problem, I think even in the design of our constitution, it is indicated that the winning party, even if you got 99.2%, the winning party must not have more than 50% of its cabinet made of that party. In other words, the current ruling party, the RPF, 50% of the ministers must belong to it, but the rest must be shared by other Rwandans. I'm just using that one as a model, but even in other echelons, the embassies, governors, provincial, and so on, you must share it out so that it is not a winner takes it all, our model of democracy. So at times people think we don't have opposition, but we choose that one reason that you cannot leave others out for 5 years or 7 years. If you left them out and leave their ideas out, chances are you may not live longer. But if you share it out, you can borrow their ideas and their ideologies and their programs and end up with a fast developing country. So stable country at peace with itself. So we must have peace within ourselves as a country, but also with our neighbors. Next. So the Rwandan model of unity and reconciliation is inspired and founded on One, national vision. We have a vision, 2020. And this vision is inspired by the vision Bishop, our president, talked about, the vision of being a Rwandan. That vision of being a Rwandan has been with the current, the ruling party for over now almost 8 years. When they established their movement, they realized that the challenge which was here was disunity. So they said, if we are to have a developing country, we must have an ideology that embraces all and gives all opportunity. So in the recruitment of their membership, the vision they had, in the recruitment of their membership, on top of it was being a Rwandan, not Hutu, Tutsi. So that ideology, that vision, that national vision, inspires most of the things we do. That's why it was easy, usually in a war period, when you capture your enemy, they become prisoners of war. For our case, they were not prisoners of war. They were just picked, took, and were given a new ideology of Rwandanness. Because they were coming from a defensive army, which was giving them an ideology that we have Hutu, Tutsi, and so on. And two, even those who had not been promoted were promoted. It is very rare in the world. That's why Bishop said it is very rare to promote your former aggressor. You know, if Honorable Minister would tell you, because he was here, is that people from the south of the country are marginalized. So they would be Hutu, join the army, but would be marginalized. So somebody would be a major from 1979 to 1994 without promotions, while those who were below him, who were second lieutenant, had become generals. So after the training, look at their CV and say, this one is a good soldier, but he was marginalized. They promoted them immediately in 1994. So I was just dwelling much on the national vision of a Rwandan vision. Then in the Rwandan constitution, as I said, you'll find some of those mechanisms that try to rebuild and reconstruct our dignity as Rwandans. And you'll find that most of our legislation will try to talk of fighting against any divisive, sectarian, nepotism that would drive Rwandans to reflect again and think that maybe it was better to be a Hutu than to be a Rwandan. So it is also inspired by the political will. You cannot do much without the political will. You must have, and this will must be entrenched in the structures and in the systems of the whole government. Otherwise, if you have top political will and there is no implementation will at the bottom, at the end of the day, good ideas, poor implementation, poor results. But the political will of Rwandan is from the grassroots to the top. Then the good leadership. You must have a good leadership to move from a failed state to a normal state. At times people compare us. At times because they see us as a normal state, they at times forget that 21 years ago we were totally nothing. So at times the demand, IMF, World Bank, the Paris Club and so on, demand on Rwanda is based on a normal state. So what they ask Tanzania is what they ask us, without remembering that for us we are reconstructing from zero. Reason, the political will and good leadership has pushed us from a destroyed state to a normal state. Of course, good governance and economic empowerment. One thing I think Bishop mentioned about gender parity in the Rwandan system. We realize that if you use one hand to lift a baggage, chances are you can either have muscle pull or muscle challenges. But if you use two hands, the weight becomes lesser. So when you use men only, chances are you get half the results. But when you use men and women, you have added another hand to your development. So when you see us moving faster, at times it's because we made a deliberate move to involve everybody, young and old, women and men, in all spheres of our government and spheres of our activities. So redefining Rwanda's identity and building a shared sense of Rwandanness was very, very paramount, and it is still work in progress. Work in progress in the sense that 2010, you may have seen our report, because it is on our website. We did what we call Rwanda Reconciliation Barometer to find out how Rwandans relate to each other now. And the answers we got, those were quantitative, created a lot of concern. Then we went into qualitative. We added there another component too.